guys, I also wanted to cover what am I working on right now with my illustration work. So I've been doing some character studies, which is really helpful. I actually have been drawing mice, and I always think they're cute and adorable. And it was actually a suggestion from the internship I'm doing right now. The illustrator was like, maybe think about making them dancers. So I went ahead and I started doing some character sketches. I just have a lot of fun with these. So when you're thinking about work that you want to do, it's just an extra little tip, like draw things that you want to actually work on, because then those are the things you're probably going to get hired for. So in this case, I like drawing animals a lot, and I really just enjoy doing these little gestures of these mice little dancing and stuff like that. So something to think about, and I definitely feel like I made some progress with this. I feel like I just don't do enough character sketches. So when I've worked on projects before, I feel like this step I didn't put as much effort into it, or I wasn't like thinking about it as hard enough. So I'm definitely delving in further, and so it really helps you feel a lot looser. And when you're drawing out your characters, you're getting a sense of the gesture involved in it, and so things aren't as stiff. Because that's one of those things that I could always work on to be better. But anyways, thought I'd share. That's what I'm working on. Hi guys, today in this video I wanted to go over some basic production terms, graphic designer terms that you would run into as an illustrator. Okay, so I know that because I've done some trade children's book work, and I found it's like terminology you're going to hear whenever you're going to make like your own print promotions, or you're going to work on any kind of printed project. Okay, so something that sometimes people aren't aware of when they're starting out as an illustrator is that whenever you create an illustration for a book, you have to make the image actually extend beyond the edge of the paper. Okay, so like this cover here, it's easier to see if you see on the inside. So see how the illustration, and then especially on like the hardbounds, it wraps around the inside. I had to make the illustration about 1/8 of an inch actually bigger than it really is. Okay, another reason is, so like on this actual jacket right here, cover jacket, this image extends beyond the edges, because the thing is, when these are after they're printed, you have something called, you're going to add this in on your own for the illustration. You're going to add something called bleed, because this, where it's cut right here, they have these big guillotine cutters, and they just trim off any extra that the image is bleeding away from the actual cut area, which is the trim. Any of the extra illustration, with it, usually it's normally about 1/8 of an inch. So that 1/8 of an inch is cut away, which is the bleed. So they cut here, here, and here. So that way, when it's cut, you're not going to have any of the actual color of the paper. Like in this case, it's white. I wouldn't want, like, if I didn't provide any bleed and I just worked to the actual size, there was a good chance you'd get like it would look something like this. Like there would be like this white here. I'm just kind of pressing on this, but you'd have this like white line that would end up, because the actual color of the paper would be left, because you just did not give them any bleed. Okay, so another way that I wanted to show this is, like, I had some postcards printed, and I think this is easier to see because I requested some printer proofs before I actually ordered my final postcards that I was going to mail out. Okay, so when you look at this, see, you can see, and it's kind of hard to see this, maybe it'll focus in. Sorry, it's blurry. Maybe bring it back down a little bit, but it's kind of hard to see that, but there's these little marks, these little black little marks. They're called crop marks. So that gives you where it's actually going to be cut. So there's like a little bit of extra of this magenta color that extends beyond the actual size of the postcard. Okay, so that is the bleed, any of that extra that's left there, so that when it cuts, I'm going to have this white here of the paper. The actual final size of the postcard, that is your trim. Okay, that's what your finished product is going to be, okay, with that postcard. Okay, so far we've covered bleed. Bleed is the extra that you provide as the illustrator, because if your image is supposed to, or have color or anything go all the way to the edge, you're going to provide bleed, okay? That's 1/8 of an inch from on all sides, okay? So it's 1/8 an inch on the top, this side, and this side, okay? So that way, when it's cut on all 4 sides, you're not going to have any of the color of the paper showing up. Okay, so another thing that you want to consider is if you are going to have like text, or if you're going to be like, when you're doing a children's book, I always think about, because people are putting their thumbs on it, you know, there's something called live area. So like in this book here, like here, let's like go to just the beginning part right here. The art director made sure, and then of course this is non-bleed because the illustration is just floating right here. It would be more of a spot illustration because it's small. I just did the small interior illustration because they thought that would be nice, and I thought it would be nice as well. But the graphic designer, the art director, you know, they know to keep the text, any relevant images within this live area. So the live area is kind of like your safety. Like, you're not going to put anything between the space here. And like normally for like children's books or magazines, I do like a 1/2 inch. Okay, so you have space here, and it's kind of like that imaginary space that you as a designer, you'd have your margin set up in InDesign so you can see, like, I only want the text to go in here because somebody's going to put their thumb. You know, you're gonna be reading that to somebody, okay? So there's always that safety. You don't have anything that you're really worried about too close to the edge, okay? So anyways, I just wanted you guys to be aware of, those are some basic terms that you want to be aware of. So the 3 terms that we covered are bleed. Bleed is the extra that we talked about that extends beyond where they are cutting, okay? Then we talked about trim. Trim is going to be where they're actually cutting to get your final finished piece. And then your live area is where you would want to keep anything like text or anything, as, you know, that's more of the graphic designer. But if you have something that you're really like, oh, I really want to make sure that it's really going to be in the scene, you want to keep it in your live area, okay? So those are things that you would consider. And as far as the sizing, you know, they're going to give you the size of your illustration. Like, most of the times what I got was, okay, this is the final size of your illustration, and then I'd be like, oh, well, can it bleed? And then I would ask, like, and I'd just make sure, are you guys doing 1/8 of a bleed? You know, or, you know, I'd be like, so what's your trim size and things like that. So whoever you're working with, as far as if you're doing traditional, like, publishing, they're going to determine the size because they're going to have standard sizes that they're used to working with. Now, if you are self-publishing, which is a total different scenario, you have, of course, more flexibility, and you're going to be able to choose, depending on who your vendor is, whatever your final sizes are. And a lot of times they're going to provide templates for you that you can download, and then you can go ahead and place them depending on what software you're using. But that's a whole nother video as far as that. But a thing I want to remind you all about is that, you know, when you're thinking about doing imagery and maybe you're doing it for a commercial job and you're really like, oh, well, I'm just doing it for that job. But if you're going to retain the copyright for it, I highly recommend that you think about, well, in terms of size and your bleed, like, what are the possibilities that you can apply this one image to? It could be used for a book, but then if you're doing a traditional publishing contract, you retain the copyright, and it's not work for hire. You know, could you get it printed for, you know, wall art or a canvas or something like that? So when you're doing your final art sizes, you probably want to work at either a higher resolution than normal. And resolution, that would be a whole nother video that we can discuss resolution about. or a much larger size. So those are things to think about, because nowadays there's so many different companies that will work with your artwork, and then you can put it on things, and then you can continue to see your art take on a new life. But these are things that I taught in my high school graphic design classes, and also that I try to use for my own work. So it's something that, yeah, really great way to keep your work living and moving on. But these are basic terms that you really do want to know about, because you would hate to do a beautiful illustration and then you're like, oh my goodness, the art director gets it and they're like, this is the wrong size. And even if you're working digitally, it is a lot of work to have to add additional bleed or do any kind of things like that. So anyways, I hope that's helpful to you guys and that you learned something new. Thanks for listening. Alright guys, one more thing I forgot to add in the video is don't put anything in the gutter. Okay, so the gutter is where the pages are actually kind of bound together or stitched together in a children's book. And so you really want to make sure that in the gutter area you don't put anything important in that space. So you kind of, you can have things in the area, like I had the background right here, but then just remember, like, anything important, like a person, one of the characters, or anything like that, you don't want it inside the gutter, just because it'll get kind of eaten up by the actual pages as they're bound together. So it's that's a big no-no. Don't put anything in the gutter. So I forgot that. So just heads up, nothing in the gutter.